So welcome back. A few weeks ago, one of the more brilliant Democrat Washington state senators accidentally forwarded a copy of a PowerPoint program detailing the brutal and expensive plans that the Washington State Democratic Party is cooking up to squeeze more cash from constituents like you and I in our state so that our bureaucratic and political class can then in turn waste that money just like they've been squandering it now for so many years. Now, many of us have actually seen these types of internal messaging documents before, but this one was just classic. And obviously, this gang didn't want you or anyone else outside the political ruling class to see this. Well, this mistake now becomes the topic for our video today. But before I get into this glimpse behind the blue curtain of our abusive political class in Washington state, please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button down below for this whole video channel. I know a lot of you don't subscribe to it, so it's worth it if you do. Facebook may indeed be dropping their official censorship programs right now, but Google hasn't openly lifted their shadow banning algorithms yet. So anything that you can do to actually help us kind of get this uncensored information out to the rest of the community will be helpful. I believe that we'll be better off for freedom and liberty if we can do that. Now, if you disagree with me or that you have a comment on this video, just don't forget to leave a comment down below. Tell me what you think I've missed, and as always, please share this video with your friends. I'm sure that our new governor, Bob Ferguson, doesn't want you to do that, which is exactly why you should. Now, back to the hapless Democrat State Senator Noel Frame from Seattle, who very helpfully made the very public mistake of sharing the internal Washington State Democrats' propaganda talking points to her Republican colleagues. That's what happens when you hit reply all. Now, obviously, this was a mistake on her part. It wasn't as big a mistake as the voters made when they first put her into office for life back in 2016, when she was first elected to the Washington State House of Representatives from Seattle's 36th legislative district, but it was still a mistake at the time, clearly. Now, clearly, they don't want you or I to see just how this unhealthy tax sausage is really created behind closed doors. No, this PowerPoint file was basically the Democrat Party's talking points for how to sell a bunch of abusive new tax extraction schemes and then convince you that it isn't the garbage that it actually is. Now, the audience was probably the mainstream media types, and of course, they will predictably lap it up as they always do, but the rest of us should certainly be questioning authority and definitely their sanity on topics like this. Now, as we have long observed over the years, no matter how much money that we're forced to surrender to our government, they will always find a way to waste it, every penny, usually in some pathetic way, and it is never, ever going to be enough, no matter how much you give them. It never is. The Democrats have controlled Washington State's financial spigots for years now, and while Republicans have occasionally been able to slow down the waste and prevent new taxes for a few years here and there over the past 30 years or so, basically the robust, mostly high-tech economy of the Pacific Northwest has been able to kind of overcome the abuse and waste that so typically epitomizes and defines our political and bureaucratic overlords in our state. Now, those heady economic days may unfortunately be past us now, however, as our state government has very effectively squandered billions of dollars in surplus just over the past few years, despite substantially increasing the size of state government. And now, for the first time in over a decade and a half, the bureaucrats and politicians appear to be running out of other people's money, as predicted, of course, once again, in this case to the tune of roughly $10 billion over the next few years. And that's assuming, of course, that anything they say is remotely attached to some kind of reality. And I think it's always risky to make that assumption, but we'll do so right now. Now, we've discussed the kind of rapaciousness of the blow to government many times before, but when the gravy train is running, very few people actually pay attention. Unfortunately, though, as we've also observed over the past few years, and the many decades before that, our governing class has only one answer when they blow through the taxpayers' resources, and it's always spelled the same way, TAX. And they want more of them, new ones if possible. Senator Frame's accidentally released PowerPoint simply serves as an illustration for some of the innovative ideas for how to abuse the people of Washington State with more ways to extract and waste our life energy. Truly, some of those tax schemes are innovative. Proposed tax per mile driven schemes, for example, on your car, taxes on unrealized fake assets or gains, or just flat out cash grabs of your various types, all kinds, with the most limited veneer of legal justification. Now, too bad. I wish these guys had this level of innovation when it comes to government efficiency or productivity, but I've never seen it. Now, you can see from the slide right here, they want to pretend that, and I'm going to quote here, taxes are not a punishment. Well, they may not be punishing to those who plan to profit from those taxes, but to the rest of our state, they certainly do punish us. Now, worse than this, they insult us when we discover just how wasted so much of our tax dollars actually become. Now, of course, the challenge that our governing class faces today is how can they convince us to actually believe their lies? And it isn't easy for them, and it gets increasingly difficult as a slowly increasing percentage of the population, they kind of fail to fall for this type of propaganda right here. And a shrinking percentage of the population actually believe the garbage that these guys shovel at us. Now, sure, we're basically forced to endure the abuse, but other than those directly benefiting from the taxpayer-funded gravy train, we just don't buy what they're selling anymore. Now, unfortunately, as I've discussed before, the challenge that we always face when the legislative session begins in Olympia is the disturbing truth that your freedom and your wallet are always at risk when the legislature comes to town. Nobody is safe. And we face the classic problem that I've frequently discussed on my live stream show over the years, which is the concentrated benefits and distributed cost dilemma. And listen, for those who need the grant grifting operations to keep going and who have made a living, as parasitical as it might be, extracting tax dollars for basically their own personal profit and promotion, there is absolutely nothing, and I do mean nothing, that they won't do or say to keep that gravy train going. And this is understandable as it clearly becomes an existential threat to their financial existence. If those tax dollars stop flowing, these are the concentrated beneficiaries of the billions of dollars that are wasted every year by our state using your tax dollars. However, the cost to keep the gravy train going is obviously distributed across a wide section of our state's population. That's you and me and our neighbors next door. And ultimately, we have to pay these distributed costs either directly or indirectly via these new and always increasing tax schemes. And sure, we do get frustrated that we have to spend another $1,500 a year on wasted fuel taxes or a few hundred extra dollars at the store, or maybe other wasted money on increased costs for things like permits, fees, permissions, etc. I mean, the property taxes seem to exceed the cost of rent in many cases. However, as obnoxious as these higher taxes can become, it actually takes a lot of energy and time to confront our political and bureaucrat classes in the state. And it's never individually, personally worth it to do so. I mean, you really can't justify the personal savings that you would get individually if you stop the tax abuse through your own efforts. It's not for the time, cost, and energy that you're going to actually have to put into that opposition effort. So most people just kind of suffer through the abuses, grumbling as they take on more overtime, maybe a side hustle, or perhaps cancel that family vacation this year so that they can actually stay solvent on the home front. It's bad, but usually not worth the individual costs to stop the abuse of tax increases. And like the proverbial camel's back, we just kind of take more and more tax straws, piling up until it breaks our back. Now, the breaking point is going to be different for everybody, but eventually our political abusers will put on enough straw weight just to get us to even if we're okay today. And this is actually why I call this the concentrated benefits and distributed cost dilemma. And while this dynamic kind of begins to change, it's really when we find people who are willing to lead the charge to fight back against a political and bureaucratic overclass that's out of touch and clearly bribed for life. And eventually, like semi-free people in most cases, as you are probably aware, we're not really free, but we are semi-free right now. So as semi-free people, we find individuals willing to confront our political overlords in some way, and we organize to stop the abuse. Now, for most people, this means maybe donating to a group willing to push back. For more sophisticated organizations, you might actually hire a lobbyist or run a media campaign. Maybe it's just the simple sharing of media posts and information with your family and friends about the crazy new tax scheme that's being proposed. This activity actually varies from person to person if you're on the distributed cost end of this equation. And so then we come to the Senator Frame herself and this mistake of giving the rest of us heads up on the many proposed tax ideas the Democrats want to push on us this cycle. Now, frankly, most of these tax proposals, they will probably fail or really not go anywhere. It's not because the Democrats can't theoretically force us to suffer as much as they want, but there are often competing interests, and there's a limited amount of time, and thank God for a part-time rather than a full-time legislature. Now, usually there's some infighting and distraction that happens, and then sometimes our pushback efforts actually expose enough of the ugly side of their schemes here that they fear the potential political repercussions down the road. History is oftentimes filled with plenty of examples where a political class gets out of touch with their constituents and then arrogantly assumes that they can do what they want regardless of how much they hurt the people. It really becomes a balancing act for the politicians, even in Olympia. And in a few months, we will have a much better idea which of these proposed tax abuse schemes, if any of them, actually look like they're going to be making that final cut. Now, this year is also quite different because, unlike in past years, I suspect the changes in D.C. here will have a potential impact on our state. Now, usually I'm actually quite skeptical of D.C. having any positive impact on Washington state, but this time might be just a little bit different. And I only say this because we've never seen an effort in our lifetimes like what's being sketched out right now by Musk, Vivek, and Trump, at least in theory. Now, with how they want to downsize the blob of big government, I'm not sure that they can actually make the impact that they aspire to achieve, but I completely support the concept. And our nation's bloated big government is in desperate need of serious downsizing. Now, clearly, if some version of this effort truly happens in 2025, I suspect that it will result in less federal tax dollars coming to our state. Now, generally, in the context of the national need to downsize our bloated federal government, this is a good thing. But it will serve primarily as a big distraction to those in our state right now who are concentrated beneficiaries of this federal tax scheme. And I really can't predict exactly how the dominantly low-quality political leadership that we have in our state responds. I mean, we really can't presume they're going to respond rationally. They usually don't. But listen, it is fun to mock the politicians we have. Unfortunately, that we've sent them down to Olympia this cycle. Many of them are clearly clowns and low quality by any normal standard, but they deserve all the mockery they receive. Now, listen, you wouldn't trust your kids to be left alone with most of them, and you would probably never hire any of these guys to work for you either. And yet, we will have to muddle through this gang as they kind of flounder around during this legislative session, and then do our best to expose the truth about them as we go along. So keep in mind, at least at some level, many of these folk know that they're doing the wrong thing, and this is why they're so happy to kind of keep pushing censorship and exhibit basically a strong desire to silence their critics. Critics like me, probably like you. Given the chance, they just want to echo chambers, just like the Seattle Times, King 5 News, and just a few other approved outlets to just parrot the talking points like they had in this PowerPoint presentation. And they can pretend that it isn't a fiasco in the making down Olympia. This was the whole point of this PowerPoint, actually, in the first place. Our governing class can always count on what is left of the traditional media to carry their water, either because of ideological conformity, which is a problem, or just simply by making it so easy to just reprint the propaganda and then pretend it's real news of some kind. However, there is an opposition in Olympia, and most of this opposition will be on the Republican side of the representative chambers right now. There are no Republicans in any statewide elected office, so those independent agencies like OSPI, which is Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, or DNR, the Insurance Commission, these are going to basically continue on the crumbling trajectory that they're currently on. But when we see capable opposition expressed in the legislature, it's worth highlighting the opposition and promoting the elected officials who are actually doing a good job pushing back. This is something that I think we can all do. Ultimately, we do need better politicians in Olympia who share our goal of more freedom, more liberty, and less abusive government. We need more of them. And we don't have enough people like that there today, but we won't get any more if we don't widely disseminate the craziness of the goofy clowns that are in there today. Now, let me close with this suggestion on what you actually can do. And listen, I don't expect you to be able to watch the minute-by-minute committee hearings and testimony in Olympia every day. However, there are a number of people, myself included, who will try to highlight the craziness of these schemes and then give you some sense of which bills are worth opposing, which ones are going to probably fail on their own, and then give you as much of a glimpse behind the blue curtain of abuse that Olympia provides us every year. Most of this will be bad, but there could be some good ideas that maybe overcome the bad ones as well. It's rare, but possible, even when there are this many lefties in town. What can you actually do about it, though? I'm going to tell you about 3 things here that anybody can do, and I suggest that you try them, and maybe all of them if you care. Now, first, it has become very easy to sign in and comment on a bill in Olympia, especially if you want to have opposition or support. In some cases, a number of observers will be exposing these bills, and it's worth the few minutes that it takes to actually remotely sign in and then indicate your support or opposition along with commentary if you want. They might appear to ignore you, but this actually becomes a metric that insiders do track. Now, watch what many observers like Jason Rantz, Ari Hoffman, or Brandy Cruz have to say. Watch those social media feeds, maybe even Facebook, if the censors indeed are actually going to let you see what's going on, and you can oftentimes then just direct link to the bills. And then spend just a few minutes every day doing this. It really does add up. It doesn't take a lot of time. Anybody can do it. Now, secondly, when you find thoughtful commentary about why these bills are bad or good, feel free to then share that widely with, again, everybody you can, and ensure that those people now also provide commentary on those same bills. And it just becomes widely known. I mean, this is actually one way to bypass the censorship efforts of Governor Bob Ferguson and his friends and the traditional media that are obviously expected to parrot the talking points that we've seen in this released PowerPoint program that we discussed earlier. Now, finally, if you actually live in a district where your elected officials are supporting the insanity that you're going to be witnessing in Olympia this coming up legislative session, take a note of it and then be prepared to find and support a better candidate for that office in a few years. It won't be this year, it'll be next year, but eventually this political class, they get replaced. It's inevitable. However, you can help that chance and that change actually happen sooner, or with a better option, the sooner a new, capable, and serious candidate can actually be found in the district who's willing to run in opposition. Not somebody who will wait until the last minute, but someone willing to confront the bad guys now in a visible and effective way today. I'll probably do another video just about this particular subject in the near future, but every politician can be replaced, and it is better to start early rather than late. We're in for a crazy 2025. I know this, so do you. I suspect it's very true. There will be good stories out there to report. There will be bad stories to report. But if we want to have any type of impact on this future, we need to be engaged. The more of us who actually engage on the side of liberty and freedom in opposition to the abusers and their abusive programs, like what this hapless state senator exposed, the better off that we're going to be. However, it does require that we show up. And it starts with you and I, and it always starts now, because in the end, the future belongs to those who show up.